Well, Will here. It's pretty early, but you know what? That's okay. So I don't know. The other day I made a video. Last night I made a video talking about finding your power and my thoughts on power and psychological disorders, and I'm going to add to that in this video and kind of explain it a little bit more in depth. I had some time to think about it. So if you think about psychological disorders as a compulsive pattern or compulsive patterns of behaviors, and then you look at addictions, right, as targeted compulsive behaviors, right? You kind of see that it's all compulsive behaviors, right? So, addiction is linked to trauma. And I made the claim in the previous video that disorders are linked to trauma, right? Anything that steals our power from us, right? It results in this unconscious act of the person to regain their power, right? And usually it happens by exerting power over something else, right? It's this unconscious process. And you can really understand it. Drinking my coffee. You can really understand it if you look at the brain. Like when in nature an animal feels threatened, they act aggressively and intimidating, right? So in the human brain, we have our critical thinking level, which is like the cortex, neocortex. We have the midbrain, which is the emotional center, right? And then we have our inner brain, which is like fight or flight. So when you're in your neocortex, you can think clearly and make good decisions. When you're an emotional brain, the midbrain, you're not really able to make sound decisions. When you're in your fight or flight brain, you're fighting or you're running away or whatever. So things happen in people's lives that cause them to go into their inner brain, right? The fight or flight brain. And so they act aggressively, defensively. They act like they're under threat, right? Some guy could cut you off or call you a jerk, and that could send you into your emotional center or even your inner brain, right? Because that's just the programming. It doesn't matter, right, anymore. So so we start to see that when abuse occurs, to another person, it hurts them and it violates them and it invalidates them and it sends the person into their inner brain, right? And so they're trying to be aggressive to ward off this threat. The threat's gone, but the memory still lives in the body, right? So they get caught in this cycle where they're trying to overpower the aggressor. They're trying to intimidate him and ward him off through this inner brain behavior, right? And thinking and stuff, and actions, right? So, and this is where I came up with the basis of that claim. Like when somebody overpowers another person, they then unconsciously act to regain that power, the organism, to regain that power by putting power over another person, right? And that's abuse. And this is all abuse, right? But we're going to talk about ending the addiction to power, right? So I don't know, to add a few more examples for the first video. You can take, so I did some psychological disorders. You can take addictions too, because addictions are targeted. Like disorders are complex, compulsive patterns of behaviors, right? Where there's a cycle where you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. This happens, and at the root of that cycle is always this quest to gain power, right? So what I'm saying is psychological disorders are addictions. And if you even look at addictions, I didn't do any examples of addictions in the previous video last night, but if you look at overeating, a person is literally acquiring the substance and ingesting the substance that gives them power because they don't feel powerful. Same with coffee, right? Same with coffee. I need to drink 10 cups of coffee a day so I can have energy, so I can have power, right? And alcohol. Look at alcohol. People drink alcohol because it makes them feel powerful. It makes them feel unrestrained. It makes them feel free. You see what I'm saying? So there's a cycle and there's stages in power, right? So when somebody puts power over you because it was put over them, right? And it just goes on and on and on. Then they steal your power from you and you lose your power at a conscious or unconscious level, right? Disorders are more gross than addictions. Addictions are the results of disorders, and disorders are addictions, like to power, right? So when they put power over you, you lose your sense of power. You try to regain your sense of power by exerting it over other people until at some point, if you are self-examining, some people, they're so caught up in that loop that self-examining, they get pushed away from self-examining. But if you self-examine and if you're allowed to, you start to see that, wow, I've created hell on earth for myself through my behaviors, or I've isolated myself, or I've marginalized myself, right? And so it's like, well, why? Why? Oh, because I feel powerless. And that realization right there is a turning point, right? It's a huge turning point. Because then you can understand that, oh, well, if I feel powerless, then how do I find and regain my sense of power? Right? And so that's where people start to be able to look for and re-find their sense of power on the spiritual journey, right? So once you find your sense of power, right, then you get the opportunity to see that, oh, this is an addiction to power. Positive power, negative power, right? Before I realized I was being abusive or a person is being abusive, they're just engaged in negative power where they're exerting their power over other things, control, manipulation, trying to control my feelings by covering them up with something else. I mean, that's all an exertion of my power in a negative way. When you understand I've been using my power in an abusive way, then you can start to find your power. And then when you find your power, you get the opportunity to understand that, oh, this is an addiction no matter what. Like, okay, for example, me, right? So Wild Willie is a character. You know, he's a character that I've carried over from my real life to put on YouTube because I use humor as a way to overpower my feelings of inadequacy and shame, right? So it's kind of like it's an adaptive addiction, right? I'm using this power, I'm using humor as a source of power to make myself feel okay. Like, or if I feel dumb, or if I don't feel smart enough, I'll say, oh, you know, my brain fell out my ear hole, right? It's funny, and so it makes up for the lack that I feel, right? There's no inherent problem in that. But if you want to keep going, you realize, oh, like, I'm addicted to power. At the root of all my addiction is this power. This power coming from the sense of I can exert my will over life and life situations, right? And the biggest way we do it is the smallest and most obvious and biggest way we do it is like through the uncomfortable discomfort, right? Like I said, like if you're not feeling good, you know, you just cover it up with something else. Right? That's pretty common, right? So once you see that power, though, is an addiction, right? And that we're addicted to power, you can start to end your addiction to power. Now, how do you do that? Now, Ken Key said in the chakras, right? You guys, this is his. I use Ken Keyes' model for the chakras. I've created my own model for the chakras, but his are good because they're an intellectual model. They're security, sensation, power, okay, and then love, faith, concentration, insight, right? So power is really, it's the top of the bottom. if you think about it. And he says, end your addictions to security, sensation, and power. Right? Okay. So when you get to the root of power as all the source of your addictions, then that's when you are able to enter into the higher chakras. And you have to end your addiction to power. You first have to understand that you can do it in a few different ways. Religion, God, and Jesus Christ is a way that people do that with. And it works without accessing the present moment. It works because if you really read the Bible and you really understand the concepts and principles of the Bible, you start to understand that God created me. I am a bug. I am powerless in relation to the world. And then, therefore, it places impetus on the person to assume certain behaviors which allow him to let go of his power, let go of the power. Because once you find your power, you see it's an addiction, you need to let go of it. You need to get rid of it, right? So that's one way that whole works, when you really read the Bible and you understand the principles that govern it, right? But if you don't want to read the Bible, you don't want to be a Christian, that's fine, because there's another way to do it, right? So in order to get rid of your addiction to power, positive and negative, at this point it should be more positive than negative, what you have to do is you have to understand that the person who is concerned with power, the inner victim, lives in your head. He is the person that is concerned with power. When something happens and it hurts my inner victim, it's manifested in my thoughts. It's manifested in my mind, right? And the more tied my whole structure is to my inner victim, the more I'm going to be lost in whatever he says. I'm in my midbrain. I'm in my inner brain, right? I'm not in my critical thinking brain anymore. It triggered me, and boom, I'm in fight or flight already, right? So the way you have to do this is you have to understand that the present moment is antithetical to the inner victim. He does not live in the present moment. Inner victim lives in compulsive thinking. The present moment is freedom from the inner victim, right? But it's not the only step. There's another step to this, right? So say your inner victim comes up, you're grounded and rooted in the present moment. You see him, you say, oh, I see him. Say he comes up with his narrative and it's really strong. Boom, this person did this, they're wrong. You say, oh, I'm feeling hurt for something. And you can uncover what he's saying. You can look at it consciously. You can, I feel a loss. I feel hurt. I wish it would have worked out this way, right? Because the inner victim, he's concerned with power. He's trying to create a narrative that empowers himself over the situation too, or over the other person, or over the loss. He's trying to cover up the hurt, right? That's his whole job. That's what he's supposed to do, right? So what you have to do is you have to access the present moment. You have to access the present moment, and then you have to surrender. You have to surrender to whatever the reality is in the present moment. You have to practice doing that. You have to practice doing that like every day. Like you go to a meditation course from the monks, right? And they teach you how to meditate. And then they say, come home, meditate 1 hour every day. 1 hour every day in the morning, 1 hour every day in the evening. And then you go back to the courses and you meet the people and they say, oh yeah, you got to meditate 2 hours every day. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't meditate. Yeah, you have to, because that's practicing surrendering to the present moment, right? So that's one way to do it. If you don't know how to meditate, if you haven't learned yet, okay, I'm going on a walk. I'm on a walk. I get a rock in my shoe. Okay, I'm going to take my shoe off. I'm going to take that rock out. No, I'm just going to let it sit there. And instead of avoiding the rock, I'm just going to relax my foot, relax into the rock. And I'm just going to let it be there. And I'm just going to surrender to the reality of this moment right now with the rock in my shoe, and it's uncomfortable, right? Or whatever, something else. Oh, I'm in this situation and these people are really freaking me out right now. The situation is really uncomfortable. I really feel like, I'm feeling stressed and anxious in this situation. I'm just going to catch myself. Okay, I'm in the present moment. I'm going to surrender to this present moment and just accept it the way it is. It takes a strong base of being present, right? Practicing surrendering doesn't take that much. It takes like telling yourself you're going to do it and then doing it 3, 4 times a day. having a base in the present moment really helps. You're always breathing. That's the best entry point, is focusing on the nose breaths. Coming in, going out, coming in, going out. You know, when you first start, it's really hard to do that because we're so used to feeding and fueling and residing with this inner victim, right? Because we're addicted to power. But the more that we start, the more we start residing in the present moment and surrendering to the present moment, the more that we will be able to end our addiction to power. Okay, hope you enjoyed the video. Wow, Willie out.